So you want to buy an airport. Most people think an airport costs billions. Sometimes that's true. London's Heathrow was sold in 2024 for £8.7 billion. Singapore's Changi and Dubai's airport cost more. But that's only the top of the market. The price depends on where you're looking. In Europe last year, the English county of Gloucestershire put a small regional airport up for sale, starting at £25 million. A buyer was found within a week, paid a bit more, and walked away with a full runway, a terminal, and an operating license. In the United States, the dynamic is different. There are private airfields scattered across Texas, Florida, and Montana. Small landing strips you can buy outright for $500,000. They handle private planes, no scheduled flights, no commercial passengers. But if you want to make a fortune from this, you should move like the investment funds. Not long ago, the Spanish company Ferrovial sold its stake in Heathrow Airport. The buyers turned out to be private equity firms and sovereign wealth funds. Why are they buying up airports? Because an airport is a monopoly on a specific geographic area. London has no other Heathrow. Everyone who flies from there passes through the same doors. And it's right behind those doors where the business begins. And who, if not the future owner, should understand best how his business works? An airport officially makes money in 2 ways, unofficially in 3, but more on that later. The first way is money from planes and passengers. An airline pays the airport for landing, parking, a gate, and fuel. Each passenger pays a so-called passenger fee that's already built into the ticket price and varies by country. In the US, it's up to $4.50 per person. Globally, the world's airports collected about $105 billion in aeronautical revenue last year. That's landing fees, gate charges, and the passenger fee combined. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But it's not even enough to cover expenses, which is why most of an airport's profit comes from a completely different place. Airports derive 37% of their revenue from shops, parking, rentals, and advertising. In some cities like Dubai or Istanbul, it's even more than half. Imagine a shopping mall where customers can't leave, where they have 3 hours of free time, money to spend, and nothing better to do. This is a captive audience with the highest purchasing power in the country. The airport owner doesn't sell anything themselves. They simply lease retail space to companies and well-known brands. The rent comes in 2 parts, a fixed minimum each month, plus a percentage of turnover. In 2024, the Spanish operator AENA launched the world's largest duty-free tender. 27 airports, totaling €18 billion in expected turnover over 12 years, just for the right to sell perfume, alcohol, and chocolate to people waiting for their flights. Parking is the second largest revenue stream. Globally, airports earn $12 to $13 billion a year from parking. A week at JFK costs $245. At Paris, Charles de Gaulle, 7 days close to the terminal cost €265. Multiply that by 10,000 constantly occupied parking spaces and you get a tidy sum. A separate revenue stream comes from companies like Smart Cart, the ones who provide those luggage carts you see everywhere. The airport doesn't pay them anything. On the contrary, in some airport contracts, Smart Cart can pay the airport up to 50% of cart rental revenue. The same goes for Uber and Lyft. Every ride from the airport pays it a pickup fee. At smaller US airports, it's $2.50 per ride. At Los Angeles International, the airport authority pushed it up to $12 per pickup at the main terminal. That single change is expected to bring in about $100 million a year. All these charges, plus dozens of smaller ones like baggage wrapping, paid sleeping pods, ATM contracts, together generate billions of dollars a year for the world's largest airports. But buying a plot of land, laying out runways, building large terminals, and selling rental space at a markup is only half the equation. The other half is how much it costs to keep all of it running. If your future airport can handle 50 million passengers a year, operating costs alone will run north of $1 billion, about $20 per person. But this figure is highly variable. At major hubs like Atlanta or Los Angeles, it's about $15. At regional airports, it ranges from $30 to $50. At very small airports, it's over $100. The smaller the airport, the more expensive it is to serve each passenger, because the fixed costs stay the same regardless of how many people walk through. Labor is one of the biggest lines. At Los Angeles International Airport in 2025, salaries and employee compensation alone were about $500 million. Contractual services were another $300 million. Utilities were $62. Energy is the other huge line. A large airport consumes about as much electricity as a city of 60,000 people. JFK in New York spent more than $80 million on electricity and heating in 2025. At Heathrow, insurance alone was £20 million in its most recent reported year. Operational costs excluding insurance were another £428 million. That's the cost of keeping the airport open, staffed, powered, insured, repaired and ready, whether passengers show up or not. And when nobody shows up, the math gets worse. COVID-19 is the textbook example. US airports lost $40 billion over the 2 years of the pandemic. The global aviation industry lost $84 billion in 2020 alone. At the same time, the airports themselves continued to spend almost as much as in a normal year. You can't put an airport on pause. The runway must be operational, air traffic controllers and other staff must be on duty, and all services must be ready. Expenses continue even when only 2,000 people pass through the terminal instead of 200,000. That's why during periods like that, airport owners have to be prepared to spend far more than they earn. Perhaps that's why many airports have a third way of generating income, not exactly official. Every major airport has a shadow economy. Its most well-known part is lost luggage. In the US, 99.5% of suitcases reach their owners. The remaining 0.5% ends up in a system that American Airlines figured out back in 1970. In the town of Scottsboro, Alabama, there's a 50,000 square foot store called the Unclaimed Baggage Center. It buys lost luggage in bulk from airports and resells the contents. Over the course of half a century, they've sold knight's armor, an Egyptian burial mask, a live python, and a case containing a $60,000 Rolex. Separately, anything you leave at security, knives, liquids, forgotten watches doesn't end up in the trash. It goes to the government website govdeals.com and is sold at auction. But the biggest money in the airport's shadow economy comes from a different angle entirely. The best example is Las Vegas. The owners of Harry Reid International Airport asked themselves at one point, if millions of people are flying in to play at the casinos, why should we wait for them to get into a taxi? That's how slot machines appeared at the airport. Today, there are 1,400 of them. They're operated by a private company called Airport Slot Concession, and the airport itself takes its share as the owner of the space. You can also make money from the fact that your airport physically cannot accommodate everyone who wants to come. At major airports, planes land and take off practically non-stop. Each flight occupies what the aviation industry calls a slot pair, a specific window of time during which an airline has the right to land a plane and take one off. Heathrow alone is capped at about 10,500 of these windows per week, averaging 40 to 45 movements per hour. The number is fixed by physical capacity. The airport allocates them to airlines for free, but with one condition. The system is called grandfathering. If an airline uses its slot at least 80% of the time, it keeps the slot for the next season, no questions asked. If it uses it less, the slot returns to the central pool and gets reallocated. That's the rule that's supposed to stop any one airline from sitting on slots it doesn't actually fly. But there's one loophole. In 1999, a British court allowed airlines to transfer their slots to one another. Officially, this is called secondary trading, and yes, it's fully legal in the UK and the EU. The airline that holds the slot can sell, lease, or swap it with another airline, and neither the airport nor the regulator gets a cut. The biggest publicly known deal happened in 2016, when Kenya Airways sold a single morning slot pair at Heathrow to Oman Air for $75 million. The airport itself officially receives nothing from this, but the indirect benefit is enormous. The airport goes to the regulator publicly and says airlines are paying tens of millions just to get access to our runway at the right time. That proves demand is higher than capacity. Give us the right to raise the passenger fee. In April 2026, the UK regulator settled a multi-year fight over passenger fees at Heathrow. The airport had asked to raise the charge to £33 per passenger to fund a £6 billion modernisation programme. The regulator approved 28.80, less than what Heathrow wanted, but still higher than what the airlines were demanding. Even that modest hike, multiplied across roughly 84 million annual passengers, brings the airport tens of millions in extra revenue every year. At this point, the business is clear. An airport isn't transportation infrastructure. It's a monopoly on access to people at the exact moment they physically can't leave. The planes are just the excuse to gather them there. Everything else is monetization of the same single fact. The person is already inside. They've got 3 hours to kill, money in their pocket, and the only way out is through your terminal. Airlines simply act as traffic providers. They pay for landing and parking fees, and in doing so, they bring in passengers from whom the airport already makes money. This may be the only business in the world that makes money both from customers and from the intermediaries who provide those same customers. That's exactly why the sovereign wealth funds of Qatar, Singapore, and Saudi Arabia buy up stakes in Heathrow, not British Airways. Airlines compete, go bankrupt, merge. The airport is the only one, and it stays right where it is. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question. How much money do you make if you do this right? Let's run the math on 3 realistic versions of your airport. Option 1. A typical small regional airport serving about 100,000 passengers a year will cost you between $30 and $50 million. Revenue is around $10 million. Operating costs are around $10 to $12 million for staffing, certifications, maintenance, and security. The net result is typically near zero, sometimes a small loss. You don't buy this level for cash flow. You buy the land, the license, the surrounding business park, and the possibility that the city eventually grows toward your runway. Option 2. A medium-sized hub serving 30 million passengers a year. Airports like Manchester or San Diego already put you in the $4 billion range. San Diego International Airport's current $4.3 billion plan, basically a multi-year construction budget, gives you a sense of what one of these costs to even maintain. Revenue is around $1 billion. Operating costs run roughly $750 million on labor, energy, and constant terminal upgrades. Net profit is around $250 million a year. Option 3. A major international hub on par with the world's largest airports, serving over 80 million passengers a year, will generate revenue of up to $5 billion. Operating costs sit around $3.5 to $4 billion. Profit lands between $600 million and $1 billion a year. The spread depends on one thing: whether the regulator approves the passenger fee hike you've been requesting for the last 3 years. At that level, you don't buy the whole airport, you buy a slice. And a slice of Heathrow can out-earn an entire small airport you own outright. Because everything else competes for customers. An airport owns the door.